Brian Walshe lied to the police. Lied to him on January 4th, lied to him on January 5th, lied to him on January 7th. Brian Walshe went to Lowe's and bought tools. Brian Walshe went to Home Depot and bought tools. Brian Walshe, beginning about 4:54 a.m., began a frantic and tragic search that you'll hear about. You'll hear the evidence of that. You will hear evidence that those searches evolved from how best to dispose of body to even darker subject matter. As he wrestled with the fact that Anna Walshe was dead. That evidence that you will hear will be hard to understand, but it is true. On January 1st of 2023, Jim Mutlow left the family home of Brian and Anna Walshe sometime between 1 and 1:30 in the morning. Anna and Brian Walshe continued to celebrate the New Year's. They went upstairs to the bedroom. About an hour later, you'll hear evidence that Mr. Walshe got up, went back downstairs to clean the kitchen. You'll see evidence that he looked at his email. You'll hear evidence that he then returned to the bedroom, intending nothing more than to crawl into bed with Anna Walshe, the woman he loved. When he entered the bedroom and began to get into the bed, he sensed something was wrong. You will hear evidence that it made no sense to him. But he nudged Anna, his wife. She didn't respond. He nudged her again, a little harder. She didn't respond. He nudged her now in a frantic and panic reaction to where she actually rolled off the bed. You'll hear evidence that now he is panicking and he doesn't understand what has happened and what is happening. It didn't make any sense to him. It didn't make sense that somebody that he had just been with and enjoyed New Year's Eve into New Year's Day would suddenly be dead. Not him. You will hear evidence in this case of sudden, unexplained death. You will hear evidence that it is rare. You will hear evidence that it happens in young people and old people. You will hear evidence it happens in male and female. You will hear evidence it happens during the day and during the night, that it happens to trained athletes. You will hear evidence that it can be the result of both mechanical and or electrical problems within the body. You will hear evidence that it might be cardiovascular, pulmonary, neurological, or other reasons. You will hear evidence that it occurs in people who have never manifested a symptom that something might be wrong. And in fact, you will hear evidence that sometimes the first manifestation that something is or was wrong with someone is the sudden, unexplained death. That's the evidence you will hear in this case. Sudden, unexplained death is known within the medical community and the forensic community. But it is to this day not well understood, and that is the evidence you will hear. And it is not well known to non-medical professionals. And you will hear evidence. Brian Walshe never imagined somebody suddenly died. 1 hour he's with her, he cleans the kitchen, he comes back up, and she is dead. You will hear evidence in this case that Brian Walshe and Anna Walshe loved each other. Yes, there was stress in the marriage. Stress born out of a simple problem that took its toll. And that's the pending federal case that had begun in 2018 and was still going forward. And what happened was, over time, Anna Walshe got a job in D.C. with the support of Brian Walshe. It was a huge stepping stone in her career. It paid twice the salary. And they talked about it, and you will hear evidence that they had to make a decision. Brian could not leave Cohasset because of the pending federal case. So who would take care of the children? Well, Anna worked in D.C. Brian would. And he did. There was stress in commuting back and forth between D.C. and Cohasset. Brian Walshe experienced that stress too. And Anna Walshe and him talked about it. They talked about it on Christmas Day of 2022. And that's what the evidence will be. Yes, there was an affair. You will hear evidence of an affair. An affair does not make someone a bad person, does not make someone a bad mother. Make no mistake about that. But yes, there was an affair, not between Brian Walshe and anyone, but between Anna Walshe and William Faster. The evidence in this case will be that Anna Walshe did everything she could to hide that affair. That she did not tell her closest friends, her confidants, some of whom lived in D.C., the same person, Alyssa Kirby, that she spent December 29th with, drinking and talking about her life. She hid the affair. William Faster will tell you that he was unaware of any plans of Anna ever telling Brian about the affair. William Fasto will testify that they behaved differently in public in D.C. to make sure there was no appearance of the affair. William Fasto will testify that Anna Walshe told him she would be devastated if Brian ever learned about the affair. Brian Walshe didn't know about the affair. He did know. Anna Walshe had a crush on William Fasto because she told him. And he did not react in a jealous way. And you will hear evidence that over the close to decade that these two people were in love, and all you have to do is look at the evidence and the photograph you'll see of Anna Walshe. And the evidence will establish she is a beautiful woman. And it was not unusual for her to comment to Brian. I had some man look at me today. I think he liked me. That didn't upset Brian, not over a period of 10 years. And when she told him that she had a crush on William Fasto, the man who had sold them the $1.3 million townhouse in D.C., it didn't upset Brian. He trusted her. In fact, you will hear evidence from Melissa Kirby that Anna Walshe told her, I wish he would be jealous. You will hear evidence that there was no financial issues or problems. Anna Walshe had just got that job in the early part of 2022 that paid close to $300,000 a year. They owned that townhouse in D.C. It was worth over $1 million. They owned whole life insurance policies on their sons in the amount of $1 million each. Whole life that you will hear you can borrow against if you need cash. You will hear evidence that Brian Walshe's mother gifted them money, and actually you'll hear from the landlord of the home that they were living in at the time, that Brian was living in, taking care of the 3 boys, while Anna worked in D.C., that it was his mother who was paying the rent, because that's what grandmothers do. There was no financial problems here. They owned investment property in Massachusetts. The evidence in this case is that Brian Walshe loved Anna Walshe. You will hear that she spoke of him in glowing terms to William Fassler. That she said, "I want people to see the Brian that I know." You will hear how she talked about her relationship with Brian with Alyssa Curry. And notwithstanding the fact that Anna Walshe was having an affair, she described their relationship as open and honest. He believed their marriage was open and honest because he loved her. You will hear how she described Brian as her best friend to her friend Alyssa Curry. You will also see evidence of text messages that you may use to determine for yourself if there was love between these 2 individuals. The importance about those text messages that you'll see is simply that they're dated. The ones you'll see are dated beginning December 25th of 2022, 7 days before New Year's Day. 12:25, Anna Walshe and Brian Walshe are texting each other, and she is sending him 7 properties, listings, primarily out of Zillow, 7 listings of properties in the greater D.C. area, Bethesda, Annapolis. They're searching for future investment properties for the future. You'll see that, and you'll hear evidence that then she comes up to celebrate Christmas with Brian and their 3 beautiful boys. You'll see on 12/27, now that she's back in D.C., these text messages between them. And they're talking about one of their properties. And they're talking about the fact that it, in fact, sold. So now they need to figure out what to do with the proceeds. You'll see on 12/28, text exchange between Brian Walshe and Anna Walshe. Now, she's back in D.C. She's not feeling well. She's telling Brian, "I don't feel well, so I'm going to stay at home and work at home today in D.C." And they joke. And on the text, Brian says something like, "Well, I guess I'll have to get you a plunger." Anna responds, "I'll tell you what. I'll buy the plunger. You buy me that Porsche." Why? Because Anna Walshe wanted a Porsche. And what you see on that text exchange, right after she says that, is you'll see postings that he sent to her of the Porsches he'd been shopping for the women he loved. And you'll see in his medical that he was shopping for Porsches because she had asked for one. On 12/29, you'll see a text exchange between them where they're talking about a 3-story brownstone that she had found that maybe they'll buy for investment. And you'll see the text references to how much it cost, the square footage it's up and below. You'll see text exchange between them where they're talking about possible renovations in the future. They are talking about the future. And this is on 12/29. And then on 12/30, simple texts between them about her catching her flight from DC to get to Cohasset for New Year's. She texts them, "I've landed." And what you see in those text messages are she begins to send Brian pictures of her playing with the boys now that she's reunited with her 3 beautiful boys again. And then you see 7 pictures sent by Brian Walshe back to Anna, taken of her playing with the boys. And how do they sign off these texts? You'll see them. Brian says, "Love you." And Anna Walshe says, "Love you too." We've come full circle in this opening, and now we're back to New Year's Eve. And Jim Mutlow, the family friend, is invited by Anna to come to the house to celebrate New Year's Eve. You'll hear evidence that he was thrilled. He was thrilled to be with 2 people he'd known for years, but he hadn't seen in some time. He knew their kids, 3 beautiful boys. He will describe how when he drove up in the driveway, Anna Walshe ran down the driveway in her heels, no coat, on a cold winter day to hug him. And then what happened? They all went into the house. And what was occurring in the house? Brian was cooking New Year's. He was feeding them as they all talked for 4 to 5 hours. And what were they talking about? They were talking about the future. They were talking about investments. Anna Walshe told a story about how Brian had found a ring for her and the whole adventure of finding the ring and buying the ring. And she talked about it in glowing terms when she talked about how Brian did that. Mr. Mutlow will describe that for the 4 or 5 hours that he was there, he saw no problems between them. He said that Brian was happy and Anna was happy. He described the atmosphere as jovial, festive. He described it as loving. As adults do for New Year's Eve, they celebrated with wine and champagne. You will have that box, or at least photographs of that champagne box, where they signed it. And what Anna signed on that box she wrote, "Let's make 2023 the best one yet." She went on to say, "Courage, love, perseverance, compassion, joy," and signed it, "Love, Anna." Nothing was more important to both Anna and Brian but those 3 beautiful boys. They had talked about the problem of the federal case. It was stressful. When you heard in the Commonwealth's opening the reference to a divorce search, please understand that the other evidence will be that that singular search occurred between conversations between Anna and Brian about the sale of their property. You'll see that that search occurred about 8:30 on 12/27. And why is that important? The evidence will show that the only time Anna Walshe talked about divorce with William Fastow, she talked about it in terms of Brian and I attempting to preserve the family assets. Why is that important? Because yes, there was $400,000 of restitution that was going to come due. And yes, Brian may have had to go to prison for some time. And what did that mean? It meant that there was going to have to be arrangements, not just to pay the money, which wasn't going to be a problem, but the boys had to move up to D.C. because Brian could no longer take care of them. And there would be all that added expense. And they went so far as to talk to Robin Howe, their nanny, their babysitter, and asked her if she would consider moving up. So there were expenses. So when you talk about preserving the family assets, you have to decide, how is it that I make sure, how is it, as Brian Walshe will tell you, how is it that I make sure that my wife and my 3 sons are financially secure if I have to go to prison for a day, for a week, for a month, or for years? That's what they were talking about. And in all of the other digital data that the Commonwealth has been poring over for 2 years, you will not hear evidence of any other conversations about divorce. And you won't hear it from William Fastow. In fact, William Fastow will tell you he had resigned himself to think Anna Walshe was never going to leave Brian, father of her children. Jim Mutlow left around 1:30. Brian Walshe and Anna Walshe went upstairs. He went back down to the kitchen about an hour later to clean it up. And then the impossible, the unimaginable happened. It didn't make sense to Brian Walshe. It was confusing. He never thought anybody would believe that Anna Walshe was alive 1 minute and dead the next. And all he could think about were those 3 boys. What would happen to their 3 boys now that Anna is no longer here? What will happen if they think he did something bad to Anna? Where will those 3 boys go? And so, he told the story. He told lies. He tried to hide so he could hang on to those boys. Brian Walshe never killed him. Brian Walshe never thought about killing him. Never think about that. Brian Walshe is not guilty.